Hi, you're on the This Is Crime channel. I'm Matilda. Listen to my new story. The Patricia Hearst story. Patty Hearst is the heroine of the strangest terrorist project of recent times. It is difficult to imagine a more appropriate image of poor little riches than this fragile girl from the snobbish suburbs of Baltimore with a bloodless face, asthenic, and anxious eyes. The mystery, for 30 years not giving rest to journalists and all sorts of experts in psychotechnics, remains her jump from a 100% bourgeois fairy tale straight to the pages of criminal political chronicles. What was it? The result of competent brainwashing? Or was it still, and somehow everyone wants to believe it more, the dizzying temptation of joining the rebellion, a real, contrary to the despicable life philosophy of the bourgeois, force that reshapes the world? Patricia Campbell Hearst is the granddaughter of legendary publishing magnate William Randolph Hearst, the most likely prototype of Cain from the corresponding Orson Welles movie. Super profitable family business and strong friendship with influential politicians in the post-war years led the Hearst clan to the top of the American establishment. Under such circumstances, the future of Patty, the heiress of the media empire, looked absolutely transparent, and nothing, as they put it in the perestroika press, did not bode well. Patricia's privileged college buddies later recalled that this wealthy bride was reserved, arrogant, and held to no-nonsense moral rules. For example, one of her admirers' girl rejected for occasional smoking cannabis. Was Patty extremely far from the leftist attitudes and talk, wildly fashionable in the early 70s in students of humanities? Then again, no one could remember her walking around Berkeley with a Mao quote book, or, say, with Malcolm X's ballot or bullet pamphlet. The real story of Patty Hearst begins just after her 19th birthday. In February 1974, Randolph Hearst was notified that his only daughter had been kidnapped by unknown assailants right off the Berkeley campus. A few days later, the media reported that the Symbiotic Liberation Army, an extremist group that until then had been little known even in radical circles, was claiming responsibility for the kidnapping. The founder and leader of the SOA, African-American Donald DeFreeze, saw the organization's purpose as propaganda and direct action, paving the way for ruthless revolutionary violence against the racist establishment. The Symbiotists' program, in the usual spirit of the North American left, was called Death to Fascist Insects and was a mix of Trotskyism, Maoism, Black Panther ideology, and elements of New Age environmental philosophy. The predominance of female members in the group, it should be noted that the number of SOA never exceeded 15 people, gave reason to compare it with the family of the all-American douche Charlie Manson. But, if you look into the essence, the cult of love and fear of this sexy feeder of reporters had nothing to do with the real subversive, albeit thoroughly mixed with happening, practice of DeFreeze and his men. As a first condition of his daughter's release, DeFreeze demanded that Hearst transfer $1 million to homeless relief funds. This plot looks like a mocking inversion of the traditional ransom demand. For more than a month, negotiations with the kidnappers were fruitless. As the newspapers later claimed, Patty Hearst was physically and mentally abused while held at the safe house. But both she herself and SOA fighters categorically denied this fact. According to their version, from the very beginning, after a couple of heartfelt conversations, Patty became a convinced supporter of the ideas of the SOA and the proletarian revolution in general. Anyway, in April '74, that is 2 months later, the mass media exploded with a sensation. SOA militants had committed an expropriation, simply put, an armed robbery of a bank in San Francisco. On the videotape that recorded the action, the kidnapped girl in a black beret with a red 5-pointed star and a carbine in her hands is clearly visible. She is now called Guerrilla Tanya. Patty's parents and journalists unanimously declared that she was under the influence of some psychotropic drug or almost under hypnosis. Subsequently, This was the source of the zombification version. Meanwhile, both the Hearsts and newspaper editors began to receive tape recordings of Patty declaring her unconditional adherence to communist ideas and renouncing the bourgeois pigs, her parents. Then the SOA, with Comrade Hearst in its ranks, undertakes several more raids on banks and government offices and, as a climax, shoots Marcus Foster, superintendent of schools in West San Francisco, with cyanide bullets. The latter, it must be said, was a rather unpleasant type. The specific reason for Foster's execution was his initiation of forced enrollment of students in municipal schools, that is, schools for the poor, on the plausible pretext of fighting drug dealers in colored neighborhoods. After Foster's murder, of course, the SOA was taken seriously. Their headquarters on 54th Street was surrounded by hundreds of police and FBI SWAT teams. Several symbiotists were killed during the assault, 3 were arrested, and Donald DeFreeze shot himself. However, Patty Hearst managed to unfathomably escape from the surrounded house. About a week later, another tape surfaced of her saying, "I burned in the 54th Street fire, but like a phoenix, I rose from the ashes to continue the fight." Catching Patty Hearst was already a purely technical task. In late 1975, she was apprehended in Northern California. The trial, one of the most tumultuous in U.S. history, lasted several months. Hired by Randolph Hearst lawyers and psychiatric experts, insisted that Patty was not aware of her actions, being under extreme psychological pressure. The psychotropic version fell away. There were no traces of drugs or tranquilizers in Patty's blood. The defense focused on alternative versions of brainwashing through powerful will suppression, hypnotic techniques, or neurolinguistic programming. However, the jury did not find these arguments convincing, which, along with the defendant's own strong refusal to testify, led to the guilty verdict. Patty Hearst was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The persistent efforts of her parents to save their lost daughter 2 years later ended in victory. President Carter overturned the verdict, and Patty was released from prison, subject to a lifetime restriction of certain rights and a long course of psychiatric treatment. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel and put a thumbs up. Look forward to more stories from the team of our channel. This is Criminal.